Hey guys, it's Elise and welcome back to My Cupcake Addiction. I've been doing giant versions of my favorite cakes and candy bars for a while now. Today I'm going to take you to one of my absolute happy places, the jam donut, but I'm going to do it in giant size. The things that you're going to need to make this massive mega jam donut or jelly donut: I've got some flour, sugar, eggs, I've got a little whole milk, some cinnamon because it's a donut, I've got some vanilla, some oil, just an olive oil or a vegetable oil, a little bit of butter, and I've got some raspberry jam and some plum jam today. I'm going to leave all of the quantities, measurements and conversions you need for your recipe today on the MyCupcakeAddiction.com website. Today I'm going to make a double batch of cake. So this is a single batch and I'm going to make two. So we are making one heck of a jam donut. Let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my eggs, my butter, my vanilla and my cinnamon, and also my sugar, I think, and pop it all into a mixing bowl. I'm using a pretty large mixing bowl here and making a huge mess. I'm using a pretty large mixing bowl here because this is a big batch of cake. It's actually going to end up being two big batches of cake. In goes my sugar, vanilla. You know what? Your oil can go on at this point as well. In goes the oil and eggs. And then 3 teaspoons of my cinnamon. 1, 2, 3. I want this to be really nice and cinnamony. Pop that down and you want to mix it until everything's really well combined and light and fluffy. So that's had a minute of mixing and it's nice and light and fluffy. And now I'm going to add in my flour. Try not to make a massive mess here. And then in goes my milk. I'm using self-raising flour, but if you're using all-purpose or plain flour, I'll also leave that option in the recipe so that you can add baking powder and create your own self-raising flour. I'm starting that mixer on a really low speed, and I just want this combined. So my last lot I mixed for about a minute, minute and a half. This I don't really want to go more than about 30 seconds because I don't want to overdevelop the glutens in my flour. I'm going to take my bowl, so I'm using a metal 8-inch by about 3.5 inch high bowl here. It's got a slightly flat bottom on it, but otherwise it's perfectly round, and I'm going to give it a really, really good spray. Who needs cake tins when we've got metal bowls? This cinnamon cake mixture does sometimes tend to stick just a little on the base of the bowl, so I've got just a round of parchment, and I'm just going to put it just on the very, very bottom. I don't want to cover the whole thing, just that very bottom section. Pat it down on the spray and that'll help our cake release really nicely and easily. Up comes our cake and that is all going into this bowl. Spreading it out so it's nice and even on top, and you really want that to be about 1 inch from the top edge of your bowl. I don't mind if it goes up a little bit because we want to be able to trim it off really nice and flat. So don't overfill it, you don't want it to overflow, but don't be stingy on the mix here either. If your bowl's a little more deep or a little more shallow, you might end up with just a little bit of leftover mix. I personally would use that to make some cupcakes. This one's going to go off into the oven. It's going to take around an hour to cook, and you just want to test it in the middle with a wooden skewer. You'll know it's done when the wooden skewer comes out clean, and don't worry if the top of this one gets quite brown. The cinnamon in that makes it quite a brown cake, and as you cook it, it will actually brown. It's not burning, I promise. It's moist and delicious. Into the oven it goes. You're going to need 2 of those. When your cake comes out of the oven, you want to let it just sit at room temperature for about 15 minutes. Grab a tea towel or something to protect your hands, and then use a serrated edge bread knife to cut along the top edge. Using the rim of the bowl as a bit of a guide, you're really going to flatten off that cake absolutely perfectly. Once you've got it all leveled off and it's sat for its 15 minutes, you can run a knife gently around the outside edge and then turn it out. While it's still really nice and warm, you want to rub your cinnamon sugar mixture all over it. Definitely don't be stingy, but do this over a separate tray so you don't make a huge mess. You need that cake to be warm for this cinnamon sugar to stick. If you're having any problems with it not sticking in any particular area, just brush on a little bit of plain water with a pastry brush and use that to stick the cinnamon sugar mixture. I'm ready to put this thing together, so my cakes are cooled, everything's looking great. I'm going to take my raspberry jam and my plum jam and I'm going to mix the two together. Here in Australia, they use a type of jam that you can only buy commercially in like huge buckets called plum jam. It's a combination of raspberry and plum. So I've just taken a combination of raspberry and plum and I'm mixing them together. My raspberry jam or raspberry jelly doesn't have too many seeds in it. If yours is really seed heavy, you may want to strain it through a sieve just so that you're not having heaps of crunch in the middle, because normally a ras plum jam is pretty smooth. Now it's time to get carving. So I'm going to do all of this on my board because it's going to get a little bit messy with all of that sugar and just cake going everywhere. If you're in the mood to make cake pops, you are going to have some cake offcuts here. So cake pops are probably the perfect solution if you don't want to waste any. I'm going to flip my first cake over, and a little bit of that sugar is going to come off, but try not to handle it too roughly because we don't want to knock too much of it off. Off comes my little cooling rack, and then I'm going to use my knife to kind of hollow it out. I want to leave about 2.5 to 3 inches around the outside. I don't want to go too crazy here because I need enough support on the outside of my cake to actually allow it to be able to hold together and not split apart because it's a dome. And we're going to repeat that with our second half. Make this one not quite as deep as your other one because this is going to be our top cake and there's going to be a lot of jam going on the inside of this donut. Perfect. Now we're going to fill our 2 centers with our jam. And I'm going to go a little bit lighter on this top one because I'm going to have to try and flip those 2 together. I'm also going to put the rest of my jam just around, not all the way to those outside edges, but I just want to kind of coat this outside section of my base cake so the 2 have got something to stick together with. If you wanted to use a frosting here, you could, but try to make sure that you don't have anything actually poking outside these side edges because we want this to kind of look like a full ball without any frosting visible. All right, I'm going to assemble this in my final presentation location because once it's all assembled, I don't want to be moving it around too much. It's going to be as simple as taking 1 half. This one here is going to be the tricky one because we don't want this jam to fall out as it goes on top. So you're going to have to work quick. Baking in that bowl means the outside of your cake should be really nice and firm, which is great because it's not going to fall apart so long as it's completely cool. And flip it. Push your 2 edges together. As a final finishing touch for my jam ball, we kind of need that little spot where you can always see that they've injected the big donut with its jam. So I'm going to put my leftover raspberry and plum jam into a Ziploc bag. I'm just using a knife to hollow out just a nice little hole. It doesn't have to go all the way to the center. And then I'm going to use a Ziploc bag to inject a drizzle of that raspberry and plum jam so it looks like this has just been piped. I've literally made a jelly donut the size of my head. This, for me, is my happy place. I love a warm jam donut. Anybody that you make this for is just going to be amazed at the idea, the concept, and of course the deliciousness. If you want to check out more ideas for things that you can upsize, I'll leave the link to my giant playlist down below. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do for 2 new videos every week. And as always, guys, thanks very much for watching.